A new report grades the performance of each province when it comes to providing housing. We're joined by Mike Moffatt, founding director at the Missing Middle Initiative. Mike, thanks very much. Can you just remind us, what is the Missing Middle Initiative? What is it aiming to achieve in housing?
Yeah, so we're a think tank housed at the University of Ottawa that looks at housing issues and any issues relating to Canada's middle class.
Right. And I think part of your work, though, has been on young people and how housing in particular, they've missed out.
Yeah, absolutely. That we've seen over the last couple decades, things get harder for young middle class Canadians, and most of that, not all of that, but most of that is revolving around housing. That we're seeing home ownership rates fall, young people having to live with their parents longer, getting priced out of our big cities. So it's a top of mind concern for us at MMI.
And what is this middle housing that you think we need to build more of? It's triplexes and duplexes, for example?
Well, it's more of everything, but certainly we need more what we call family-size housing. We've been pretty good over the last 15 to 20 years of building, one-bedroom condos and things like that. But where we're really short are kind of three-bedroom homes, the kind of place where a couple might be comfortable raising a child or two.
So this report, what criteria did you use on, give us one or two, there are many, I know, but what were you trying to achieve with this report when you compared the provinces?
Well, we just wanted to look at how different provinces were doing. So we got 36 different indicators revolving around both policy, so the types of policies that they were implementing, and outcomes, what are they achieving? And interestingly, we found that provinces did best, not so much by implementing good policies, but by avoiding bad policies. So things like high development charges, high land transfer taxes, and so on. They seem to be negatively correlated with outcomes like young people being able to buy a home and affordability and so on.
Let's look at the provinces that you think have been doing a relatively good job, starting off with New Brunswick and PEI, the two Atlantic Canadian provinces. What in particular, why have they been achieving goals, do you think?
A lot of it is just they're getting out of their own way, that they're not implementing a lot of policies that are, again, harmful taxes. If you look at a place like the city of Toronto, they've got hundreds and hundreds of planners, hundreds and hundreds of policies, and everything's coded in red tape. Charlottetown, on the other hand, yes, it is smaller, but it just gets stuff done. There's fewer studies that need to be done and so on. And again, that was a big theme of the report, that, cities and provinces tend to be their own worst enemies when it comes to housing.
Well, they just too much procedure, too cautious, for example?
Too much procedure, too cautious, absolutely. Taxes that are too high. That provinces that find ways to build infrastructure cheaper and kind of spread that cost fairly across society tend to have much better outcomes than places like Ontario, where we load all of our infrastructure costs onto residential mortgages, which is both an unfair but also a very expensive way of building infrastructure.
And that's, of course, because of these infamous development charges imposed by municipalities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alberta doing quite a good job. Is that again because they tried to keep red tape to a minimum?
Yeah, absolutely. That Alberta does particularly well on creating new supply. So this isn't just a case that, provinces with slow population growth are doing well, that Alberta is growing faster than anyone, but still able to keep supply up because of that, avoiding red tape and keeping taxes relatively low.
Let's get to the underperformers, and we better jump to Ontario. You're giving the province with the biggest population a D. What is Ontario doing wrong? Because we know that, last I looked, the housing starts were falling in Ontario.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ontario has the highest development charges. We have among the highest land transfer taxes, which causes existing homeowners not to downsize on their home. We have the longest approvals process. So Ontario really gets into its own way when it comes to housing. And both Ontario and BC do a lot of what we call kind of irrelevant policies. So instead of focusing on taxes and reducing regulations, they're doing stuff like foreign buyers buyer's taxes and short-term rental regulations and things like this, which could sometimes be helpful, but they don't attack the core problem.
It's interesting. I mean, in Toronto, I guess other communities, if somebody wants to put up a duplex, they have a big hearing involving local residents. I wonder, do we really need to do that? I think the neighbours should have a say, but I don't see why people several doors down the street, they have to be listened to.
No, I don't either. That I think we should make straightforward rules and abide by them. And that's, that tends to be the approach in Atlantic Canada, outside of perhaps Halifax, where they set straightforward rules. And if you comply with them, you can build. And if you don't comply with them, you can't. Rather than making everything so subjective and such, needing all of these hearings and so on.
But I know I'm generalizing, but apparently at these meetings, you get a bunch of old, comfortable people who've paid for their houses years ago coming out and saying, oh, no, that would destroy the area.
Yeah, absolutely. I love attending. I mean, I'm close to 50, and sometimes I'll be the youngest person in the room by about 20 years. So that absolutely happens. And you can understand why that, if you are able to reduce competition in your neighborhood, if you are able to keep the number of homes relatively low, that's going to make your home more valuable. And, people as well want to keep their neighborhood unchanged. And I can understand that instinct, but it is blocking young people from ever able to own a home of their own.
Mike, thank you very much. Always enjoy following your work. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.
Mike Moffatt, founding director at the Missing Middle Initiative.